Welcome to another episode of Twice Told Tales podcast. With us today is Marwa Osman, and she's a mother of three, professor, and presenter for Press TV. So, could you tell us a little more detailed about your background, and then we'll get to.
Sure. Thank you, Chris and Satira, for having me on the show. And basically, my name is Marwa Osman, and I am an assistant professor at the Lebanese International University and Al Ma'arif University right here in Beirut, Lebanon. I'm a mother of three beautiful girls, and I also am a presenter and producer for a show on Press TV. It's called The Mideast Stream, and I'm also working on a new show that I'm going to keep on low profile for now.
Oh, that's great.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. Like I was saying, well, I'll just say what I said before. I, as someone who's involved in Palestine activism and trying to educate people on what's going on, I've always found your voice to be one that was like without, like you have the like firmest, like most. Like you never bit your tongue on describing the resistance and describing the need for resistance, and I really appreciated that because there was it's very difficult to find that in any commentary that people would talk so directly about what needs to be done and the power dynamic involved. There's always this sort of like cowardice that's involved.
I'm usually called out for being very straightforward and sometimes a bit aggressive. This is how they say in my words, but I'm not being aggressive. I'm being the opposite of aggressive. I'm just trying to defend my nation, defend my people, and the way that I use it is the way that my ancestors, the women in my ancestry, use it. We are very tough. We are very keen on making our voices heard, and when things happen the way that we don't like, we say we don't like them the way it is. So I'm not ashamed or afraid or embarrassed to say it as it is, but at the same time, I try to be as Islamic as possible, being a Muslim woman. But also being a Muslim woman, it means that I will stand by the oppressed no matter what it costs me. So actually, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Well, I think what you're experiencing is just a lot of journalism is cowardly, just like a lot of academia. And so if you are a strong voice, people who are only comfortable being cowardly are going to attack you because they're jealous of your ability to speak freely without freely, and they are not. And so I think that's maybe more of a commentary on your critics.
One of the issues that would actually explain the situation is that at one point I had a group of pro-Zionist bots or maybe accounts on social media that were targeting my universities and mentioning them and saying that I am anti-Semitic, despite the fact that I'm a Semite, but mentioning that I'm anti-Semitic because I'm speaking basically the narrative of Palestine against occupation and aggression. And what ended up happening is I was actually applauded by the university board of directors, and I was given an award. So this doesn't happen elsewhere. It happens here because we're not afraid to say it, and we're not afraid to be free within the institutions that we work in. That doesn't happen in the West. I mean, we all saw what happened with, for example, Stephen Salaita, how he was kicked out from university in the US and how he was pushed out from the American University of Beirut right here in Lebanon because the American embassy didn't like the way that he treated the Palestinian cause. I mean, but outside that institutions or that academic institutions that is basically run by the West, we are more than free to say it, more than free to write about it, to basically publish about it. Yes, we find it a bit hard to publish in the West, but I don't care. You want to read what I have to write? Come along to where I'm publishing and read it.
Yeah,
that's a great approach. Yeah, well, at a time when everyone wants to in some way conform to the so-called standards of journalism or activism, it's great to see that there are people who are not afraid of anything to speak out, and it's great that your university supported you, because that's also very important. As you said, it does not happen in the West. Like, you can easily lose your job for simply saying anything against the Israeli lobby or Israeli aggression or occupation. Yeah, or even even for refusing to take, for example, the vaccine, as we said, it happened in Canada or in the US, regardless of what our stance is. If you're saying that you allow people to practice their freedom, but you can fire people for personal choices that they make, it's very inconsistent, right?
It's very
so yeah.
Understand that issue in the West, because right here in our region, in all the region, in both puppet regimes and pro-resistance regimes, we didn't have that. I don't know why it was taken to the extreme by the Western governments. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something that we don't understand.
I could do a whole podcast usually on that if you want to host me on the Mideast stream.
That should be the next topic.
Chris is great on explaining what those things that are happening, especially so-called
the same economic forces that are behind all this other nefarious stuff. They just need ways of controlling people, and the West has a lot of there's a lot of money in controlling the wealthy populations of the West. So they're looking to these like central bank digital currencies, and they have to have a kind of universal sort of ID mandate in order to get people to be able to
suffocate us even more.
Exactly.
So it's all tied into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Plus, we have a very do-gooder liberal elite here, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, having been an activist. So they're very self-destructive, and they're happy to say that they're for personal choice all day long, and then at the same time they'll destroy their own movements by not being so. So it's crazy. But anyway, we'll leave it at that on that topic. We're here actually to talk about the anniversary of the assassination of General Soleimani. And I thought maybe to start off, you could just explain to people who may not be familiar with what exactly happened, because it's a very unusual story. Just a little overview, and then how that event affected the region, and then what has happened since then. It appears to me nothing. And has there been anything? So I would love to hear your little recap on the anniversary.
Let me start about answering the main question: who is Qasem Soleimani, and why his assassination was very vital for the Americans and the Israelis, and why it changed how the resistance operates in West Asia. Let me start by giving similarities a bit. Qasem Soleimani, who is the Lieutenant General of the Al-Quds Force, which is one of the forces that operates under the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is basically not the army, but something even above the army in Iran. So you have the actual army that fights off in regular wars, and then you have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which protects the revolution, not only the institutions, but also protects all the conspiracies against the revolution that happen all around Iran. Now, Qasem Soleimani has been involved in the resistance and building the resistance, supporting the resistance, the already founded resistance, because you can't support a resistance that the nations of said country are not ready to fight. It's not going to happen. We saw how ISIS immediately fell under the feet of the mujahideen, of the fighters, because the fighters were defending their own nations. So it has to come from within. Qasem Soleimani, late 90s, early 2000s, especially after 9/11 and the decision to invade Iraq, despite the fact that it had nothing to do with 9/11. But with after the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq, Qasem Soleimani and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they brought up or founded the Al-Quds Force, despite the fact that Al-Quds Force was actually operating since before that, but it started spreading into other nations. Since that was the main event that made it happen. And it also was in parallel happening also in Lebanon, because in 2000, the Lebanese resistance Hezbollah liberated the southern part of Lebanon, which was under occupation for the past 18 years up until that point. under the Zionist occupation. So also the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were coordinating with Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Lebanese resistance in Lebanon. And before that and after that, Iran and Hezbollah were coordinating with the Palestinian resistance inside Palestine and also inside both Lebanon and Syria, because also there is a Syrian land which is occupied by the Zionist entity and which also is part of the resistance action and activity that takes place in order to support Palestinians and to support the Lebanese resistance at the same time. So that man started managing and help coordinating between these countries, starting from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. But Syria came up to the center stage in 2011 when we also the global war against Syria with 82 countries called a coalition. The West it's legal for the West to have a coalition. It's so normal for them to bring all countries from all across the world to bomb us, but we're not supposed, the nation, the literal natives of this nation, of the Levant, of which is the Levant. When we say the Levant, we mean Syria, part of Iraq, part of Jordan, all of Palestine, and all of Lebanon. We are one country that was actually partitioned after World War II. So as a nation, as natives, we all come from the same ancestry. We all have the same culture. We have the same language. We have the same religion. So it's very easy for us to interact. That helped with the Iranian Revolution being happening in Iran and gaining more momentum in Iran, and then spreading that ideology into Iraq, parts of Syria, into parts of Lebanon, and into parts of Palestine. It's made way for General Qasem Soleimani to become the leader of the resistance in that area. Fast forward, Syria fighting terrorism. The US helping terrorists against Syria, blocking the road between Iraq and Syria, which is a big borderline, allowing Turkey to enter into the northern part of Syria, giving momentum to the Kurdish separatists in both Iraq and Syria to fight off both governments in both countries, and also taking areas that are vital for the economy, both for Iraq and for Syria. For Syria, for example, the eastern part of the Euphrates, where the US occupation forces are residing, in Al Omar oil field and in Conoco oil field. I wonder, don't their parents have panic attacks for their children because their American children are sitting in a foreign land, literally on oil fields, trying to protect the oil fields for looting in order to make more money for the US? I wonder, but maybe they don't know. Anyhow, Haj Qasem Soleimani became the commander, the field commander of that area, and started helping bringing up the resistance in a more organized form. Hence why we saw the popular mobilization units that transformed into popular mobilization forces in Iraq. Under it are more than 28 factions of resistance in Iraq. And we started seeing the Fatimiyun, the Zainabiyun, which is also the resistance factions within Syria. We also had a coalition of forces come from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, to help out with the resistance in Syria. And we started seeing also a support for the resistance in Yemen starting 2015, when Saudi Arabia, with the help of the US, the UK, Italy, and Germany, to mobilize against Yemen, to invade Yemen, to kill the Yemenis, to try and steal the resources. Because according to also information that comes from British companies and French companies that operated in Yemen, mid-80s up until the late 90s, Yemen actually holds the biggest reserve of oil and the finest gas in the world. So we're talking about trillions of dollars of resources in Yemen, hence why the war happened, and hence why Haj Qasem Soleimani helped inside of Yemen, the Ansarullah movement, which the West calls Houthis. But again, Houthis are just one tribe of the hundreds of tribes that are included within Ansarullah. So when you look, you go back, look at the map from above, and you see it was that man helping all of this resistance connect and transfer knowledge, which is very important. And this is how armies operate. They transfer knowledge within one another, and they also help one another with technology. And that's exactly what Haj Qasem Soleimani made way to happen. Haj Qasem Soleimani, with the help of martyr Imad Mughniye in Lebanon, they both were able to transfer knowledge of know-how of how to make missiles and drones to Palestine. And Qasem Soleimani with other alive commanders helped to transfer the know-how to Yemen to make ballistic missiles and bomber drones, and obviously helped transfer the knowledge to Iraq and Syria with the help both of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and Hezbollah fighters as well. We have read about it in several articles, but we have in details in the Arabic language journalism about how Hezbollah helped the popular mobilization forces in training and in gaining experience in weaponry, and also in the national guards and or the national, if you will, mobilization in Syria alongside the Syrian Arab army. So this man was basically running the show for more than 21, 22 years in West Asia, and it came to a point where the Americans and the Mossad in specific, the Zionists in specific, can no longer take it, because it happened right after the liberation of many large swaths of land in Syria and Iraq against ISIS. And in Lebanon as well, because the borderline between Syria and Lebanon was also stricken with both Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and Qasem Soleimani with the help of Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Lebanese army, and Hezbollah and the Syrian Arab army in the Syrian part of the conflict, they were able to liberate that area as well. And Qasem Soleimani, with the help of the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces and the Syrian Arab Army and the Mujahideen from the resistance forces, were able also to liberate for the first time in 2018 the El Walid checkpoint, which is basically the bordering checkpoint between Iraq and Syria. And it was vital to transfer weapons, to transfer goods, because Syria was now suffocating under the New Caesars Act, and also to try and open up a new relationship from Tehran all the way to Beirut that not only resides on military alliances, but also on economic alliances. And that was very, very important, because since 1979, Iran was and still is suffering from illegal, unilateral, punitive measures from the West, mainly the United States of America, which is still pushing the EU to keep on with those sanctions, and sanctioning Syria, and also started sanctioning certain parts of Lebanon as well. So the economic crisis started gaining momentum instead of the military crisis, because the military is a bygone. The areas were liberated, ISIS was taken down, except in areas where the US has military bases, and that's Anbar in Iraq, and the eastern part of the Euphrates in Syria. And those areas, they have military bases for the US and certain pockets for terrorist organizations like ISIS. I don't like to call it ISIS anymore, because they are basically mercenaries working for the empire, but this is the mainstream media narrative of the situation. So we're talking about a man who was managing all of this, and he was killed not in the battlefield. You know, if he was killed in the battlefield, we would at least respected the enemy, because it was a battle. No, he was killed while on a diplomatic flight to Iraq, trying to resolve certain issues in West Asia. Actually, it was going on good for people in West Asia, and he was killed by order of both the Mossad and the CIA. Donald Trump knows absolutely nothing about it, except that him as a chief of staff just says, yes, okay, I give you the green light. But that was going to happen whether he gave the green light or not. And how I can get evidence from that is what Donald Trump actually said when he was scared to the point of blaming Netanyahu and Israel for that assassination, and being afraid to travel in his own what do you call the first the plane of the Air Force One. He's afraid to take Air Force One anywhere above West Asia. Hence why he, in the middle of the night, turned off the lights of his airplane and landed in an airbase in Iraq, and then summoned the Iraqi leaders up to him. Who does he think he is? And still, up until now, according to a certain intel information, Trump is still afraid, because he knows that the call for revenge is real in Iran and in West Asia in general. And he is part of that revenge, because he is part of that decision. But he's not alone. Everyone who made that decision, specifically in the United States of America, should be afraid, because they equally, as if the United States of America killed the Minister of Defense of another sovereign nation. This is who Qasem Soleimani was. This is how vast and important his assassination was and how critical it will be after his assassination. Now, we can talk about what happened after that if you want, and why it is even more important, why the impact of the assassination made more way for the resistance, if you'd like, in the next segment.
I would love to know how that affected resistance.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, to ask you actually about the Iran's response so far, because we know that the attack on Ain al-Assad base in Iraq, which actually didn't take any casualties, like nobody died in that attack.
That's what the US.
And Iran,
no. That's what the US
said. But it was very.
We know how to count casualties, and casualties were appearing out of nowhere. US soldiers were falling dead or being reported as injured up until 7 months after the assassination. It started 2 weeks after the Ain al-Assad target, after targeting Ain al-Assad airbase, which basically is a house for 2,000 US occupation soldiers. And if you look, you can watch, don't believe me, watch the 60-minute report. There's a show, a very famous show, I don't know on which television channel in the US, it's called 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
If you watch it, they have a special report from a drone that was actually filming how the missiles were landing. No way in hell there were no injuries there. I mean, we know war. We've been under missiles. I personally was not my it's what wasn't my apartment, was the building next to me. Trust me, there were injured people and there were fatalities that were reported either with friendly fire or with injuries that happened for what they call it in the US. It's like discreet. We can't say where it happened, and every one of them was taken via a helicopter to certain Arabian countries like Kuwait and Qatar, and then airlifted to Germany to be treated in Germany. And there were also reports, especially in Lebanon, Lebanese newspapers, stating that many of these men, it was so, I mean, inhumane to a point that the US did not report them being injured in action. They were reported to have died in the hospital in a way that their families wouldn't get paid the same way that they would have gotten paid if they were reported to have died in action. This is beyond disrespectful. Not only you chose to cover up what happened to your own soldiers, you're also covering up where their fatality happened or their injuries happened to get away from paying what you should pay for the families. I mean, who does that?
I was following this. I want to just like back you up on that. Like after that attack, I was like, there's no way nobody died. And I was following, I did like keyword searches for Google about like soldiers dying. And for months afterwards, there would be these weird deaths. And even that first week, there were like 12 weird deaths. One was like a guy in Germany in the middle of the night died, and he had like his face was smashed or something. It was like, what? How do you die just in your bunk bed, like sleeping? I mean, there were so many bizarre deaths. I can't remember the details, but it was clear that they were just shipping them around the world.
Yes.
The point I was going to make.
Missile, if you watch that drone missile video and you see the basically the distance that was covered by the missiles, and then you go to the AFP and Reuters videos and watch the videos that were actually distributed to the media, you find out that they only distributed an angle. Only one angle. There was no 360 angle for a camera. They didn't show 360. And at the same time, it only showed 2 or 3 bunkers that were being cleaned by soldiers. They didn't show us anything else, despite the fact, if you zoom out and see the drone footage from the 60-minute report, you would go like, whoa, why didn't we see this on the ground? This is like, this covered at least a 5 kilometer squared area. Why didn't we see that? Why wouldn't we see that? Because it would put them on the spot and show that the Ain al-Assad airbase retaliation was a real retaliation, but was not the only retaliation.
Yeah, as Iran has called it, it's been just a slap in the face. Yeah, they have to wait for a thing. And the point that I was going to make is that yeah, of course, that attack had casualties, even though the U.S. tried to deny it, and there are reports that it actually happened. But the significance of the attack, I believe, is that it was the first attack after probably World War II on an American base, and that's even a lot more humiliating to
Not
the
only
American
that,
forces
it
than
is
the
the
casualties
first
itself.
attack of its kind against a military occupation base for the Americans by a sovereign state that actually announced that it's going to do it. It does it, and nothing happens after it. That was
Exactly.
historic. And that's why you don't see it in the media. That's why it was not really reported extensively. I mean, you could see it like for a day or two, and then it just disappeared from the American media. But trust me, we sang and danced a lot in Victoria's dances about this. And look, when I say this, I don't want to sound as if like I'm a witch celebrating the death of soldiers, especially American soldiers, for the American people that might listen to me. But hey, I mean, your soldiers are more than 10,000 kilometers away from their borders. What are they doing in my region? Why should I accept them as foreigners in my region and accept them killing me, killing my native people, my ancestors, my children, killing the future of my children with sanctions, and I should just sit around and say nothing? No, I'm going to be joyous at every moment that I have seeing them running, being bombed, because we have been bombed since 1938 and no one said a word. We have been killed excessively and extensively, time and again, decade and again. My children, they don't have a grandfather. They don't have a grandfather. My husband was 5 days old when his father was assassinated, killed by the Zionist entity who was supported by Britain and the US only because he was defending his own land. He's a soldier in the Lebanese army. That was before the resistance even happened. He was a soldier in the Lebanese army defending his own village. It's called Khiyam village on the borderline with occupied Palestine. And he was killed by the Israelis for defending his land. And you want me not to celebrate the death of my enemy? I will celebrate it. I will advance it. I will promote it. I will do it myself if I am capable of doing it. Why shouldn't we? You are very much bold and brave and celebrated as a hero for killing other people thousands of miles away from your house, from your home, from your border, from your family. But I am branded as a terrorist for asking the same. The safety of my family, the liberty of my nation.
And they did not die just, they weren't some innocent American walking downtown New York or I don't know, whatever, and then someone attacked them that we're celebrating. They died.
Killing Iraqis since
Exactly.
2003 and stealing their resources, not allowing the government to operate as it should because they are basically dictating who the leaders of Iraq should be, putting their hand on the Iraqi treasury, putting their hand on the Iraqi bank, the central bank, not allowing the economy to operate as it should. Iraq is a very, very rich country. Where is that wealth? In the pockets
killing
of
500,000 children with sanctions and saying that it was worth it. Like
so occupying a third of Syria and stealing 80% of their oil right this minute.
Exactly.
And Americans don't even, I mean, most Americans don't even know. And even if they did, they don't care
about it. They don't know.
No,
I've watched a lot of the videos online where a young man goes around different American states asking the people in the streets, putting a map out there and asking them, where is Syria? A lot of them point to Canada. And I'm like, oh my God, they don't even know where their tax money is going and which kind of people they're killing. Well, it is mind-blowing for me that Americans don't know that my coworker, my colleague, Serena Shim, who's an American Lebanese, was killed by Turks on the border between Syria and Turkey because she had evidence that the World Health Organization was getting soldiers and mercenaries in the trucks of the WHO into Syria with the help of Turkey. She was killed there then, and she's an American. Nothing. The Americans have no idea that it was an American plane and an American bomb clicked by a Saudi pilot who killed an American boy in Yemen who was at his sister at a wedding and his sister. It's just mind-blowing that how much of a detention. It's like one big prison that the U.S. holds. It's holding 300 million people in the United States of America hostage, not knowing what's going on outside, while stealing their tax money to do whatever foreign policy aggression they want to do, while taking away their health care, their free education, taking every kind of dignity that people should have and should demand from their government. It's just mind-blowing how there's no protests right now in the U.S. It's just crazy.
I just noticed this yesterday. I'm just going to throw this in because it's exactly what we just noticed. Like, I saw this article on Yahoo News this morning about nuclear war and the 6 cities their nuclear attack is most likely to happen. And it occurred to me that the people who read this, they have like they have no reality, because they're supporting policies that is taking all this money that could be used for like revolutionizing America, healthcare, whatever, like hundreds of billions of dollars, siphoning it off at the cost of inflation for the US dollar. So everything in the country costs more. People can't afford things. And at the threat of nuclear annihilation for like a corrupt country that none of them could find on a map. Like, it's like, what? Why are the media is so powerful? It is just unbelievably powerful. They're able to just brainwash people. Nobody knows that we're causing an electricity crisis in Syria by stealing all their oil. Nobody recognizes any of this. And it's just like, whenever there's an outrage against America, they're like, oh, they're terrorists. They don't, we're such good people. It's like, no, you don't. You're like destabilizing most of the world.
Chris, is actually, they are good people. They are hardworking good people, but they are ignorant, hardworking people.
Which is dangerous. That's not a not dangerous person. Dangerous. An ignorant person who is very dangerous. You know. Yes. Yeah, that's why you don't give children scissors or handguns, because they're going to cause problems. So like, you don't. And
it's the ignorance that is facilitating the massacre of other nations. And so, yeah, it's not an. Yeah, as you said, like they're
why, Sarah, by the way, the legacy of Qasem Soleimani is to push people further into demanding their right, into reclaiming their right. That's what the school of Qasem Soleimani is about. When I visited Kerman and before I went, actually after I went to the shrine of Qasem Soleimani, I went to Kerman University, where he actually used to give courses. I didn't know that he was an assistant professor at that university. I didn't know that he actually got into classrooms and spoke. He was all over the place. He was such an amazing human, but I sadly only got to know more about him after his assassination, after his martyrdom. When I went to Kerman University and I started talking to the people and learning what kind of classes he was giving and what they took from those classes and what kind of books they wrote about him, hundreds. I have photos of hundreds of books written by students in that university celebrating the legacy of Qasem Soleimani and how they can present to the world solutions from the thought, from the ideology of Qasem Soleimani. And we're not talking about military. We're talking about medicine. We're talking about sociology. We're talking about education. We are talking about culture. He was at every level, such an astounding person. He was astonishing. He knew a lot. This is what we call a cultured person. When you know a bit about everything and you are able to start a communication and a conversation about anything, that's who he was. And he was celebrated by those students. And I made a promise and a vow to myself to make a connection between those students and my students right here in Beirut, because I want to make sure that the legacy of Qasem Soleimani lives for hundreds of years to come. Because just like when I visited Havana, for example, this summer, and I learned a lot about Jose Marti and about Armando Hart, the then Minister of Culture during the first government that happened after the basically the revolution and the victory of the revolution. And I learned about all these people. It was like when I learned about Jose Marti and I was talking about Qasem Soleimani, and they were making these basically comparison, and it's like talking about similar people who had love for their communities, who had passion about liberation, who had passion about standing with the oppressed against the oppressed. I mean, we're talking about Qasem Soleimani in West Asia. We didn't even mention his sacrifices in Afghanistan and what he did for the liberation movement of Afghanistan. We didn't talk about his thoughts and his struggle for women's rights. We didn't talk about how he spoke, especially in an Islamic community, and how he gave specific advice for the community to respect women, whether they are veiled or not, because it's their personal choice. We didn't talk about Qasem Soleimani. He spoke about mothers and how we should always respect the mother because it's the basic unit of every generation. We didn't speak about Qasem Soleimani, how he spoke about the youngsters, the young boys who whenever they saw him in a Husainiya or in a musalla, in a mosque, they would approach him and talk to him and speak about their aspirations and what they dream and how he would motivate them. That man is a leader, by an innate leader, and he's a commander at every level because he's loved by the people, because the people used to listen and hear in his voice, in his eyes, in the way that he communicated with the people, how sincere he was, how much of a human he was. It's not only Qasem Soleimani, the lieutenant general, it is Qasem Soleimani, the human. And this is the difference between how we look at our commanders and how the West actually brings about its leaders and commanders, because the United States of America basically thought that by killing Soleimani, we're just killing another general. They thought about it the way that they knew, the way that they understood, but they still failed to understand the ideology behind it. They still failed to understand how an Islamic revolution in Iran can be so victorious 40 plus years after the revolution, because they don't understand how it's embedded in the ideology, in the culture, in the academics, in the institutions. They don't know how it's embedded in people that are steadfast against any sanction, against any suffocation. When you talk to an Iranian and say, I always start by saying, I'm sorry that you are going through this, especially the sanctions. They say, this is just part of life for us. It's okay, it's part of life for us. And this is exactly the same thing that I witnessed in Cuba, in Havana, Cuba. When I spoke to the people, they have been under sanctions since 1959. And they were able to do amazing, amazing work at the level of the community. They provide people with food, free food if they're not able to cook for themselves, free houses if they're not able to have their own houses, free medicine for everyone. This is exactly what Iran is about as well. It's a revolution for the people. How can you break down a revolution or an ideology of a person and a school of thought of that person when the essence of that school of thought is the benefit of the society, is what's better for the society, is building a better human value in that society? While in comparison, you look at the West, they denigrate women. They basically put a bomb and bombed every kind of family or unit family. They completely distorted the image of a family. They completely distort the group value. They focus on individuality and celebrity life and whatnot that is denigrated, that has nothing to do with human values. I'm not only talking about Islamic values, modesty or respect or the role of women, or I'm talking about basic human dignity, which comes from liberation, freedom, having the right of a shelter above their head, having the right for education, and having the right for free medical attention. This is how Lebanon was until the 2019 crisis, economic crisis. We didn't have people dying at hospitals because it was basically free. Up until now, despite the economic crisis, we are still one of the best countries in medical care in the Middle East, where people come from all across the world to have medical attention and medical treatment in Beirut and in Lebanon in specific. But they broke that. They want us to be part of their liberal economy, where basically you see homeless people on the street. We never had that. These couple of years were the first in my life that I see homeless people in Beirut and Lebanon in general, because of the economic sanctions, the economic hardships, and the corrupt elite that the United States of America makes sure that they remain in place in Lebanon. The same thing in other countries. But Qasem Soleimani came along to break all of these Western values, to put an end to the hegemony, to put an end to the upper hand, which is an evil upper hand. You know, if the US actually worked a bit for the benefit of the society, it would have actually gathered a group of people around it to support it. But you will never find a community or a group of people that would support the occupation. But because they never felt anything except of aggression, except of denigration, of humiliation and disrespect, even the occupation soldiers in our country, they disrespect our citizens by looking down on them, by talking down to them, by basically being aggressive to them. I mean, if you watch how the U.S. was operating in Iraq from 2003 up until now, you see that at some point when soldiers were bored, they would just shoot randomly at people and kill them. Qasem Soleimani was the absolute opposite of that. The absolute opposite. Hundreds of videos online where in villages in Iraq and Syria, women, men, older people, younger people looking at the camera and saying, please, Qasem Soleimani, send us your fighters to help us, to liberate us. And he would never leave that call, never. There are videos that I can't watch because they are too much emotional for me, because it's such an emotional attachment with that personality, because it was very heavy for me to accept that man who gave his life, and many of my students who gave their lives to protect me and my daughters. At one point, at the last twin bombing that happened in Beirut, I had both of my kids in the back seat. One was 2.5 years old, one was 5 months old. And we were supposed to die, but because of traffic, I chose to go to the parallel street. And because of the likes of Qasem Soleimani and the likes of my student who were killed in Syria, that I am now free and I am safe and my kids are safe. What kind of a terrorism are they binding us with when we are the people who are being killed? When people like Qasem Soleimani actually helped liberate us, helped rid us from ISIS, from terrorism that no one could actually think of. These people were eating the hearts of humans. This is what kind of barbarism we are talking about. And Qasem Soleimani was the leader who brought our powerful, our resilient, our dignified men to stand up and say no. This is why they killed Qasem Soleimani, because it was rarely ever said no to them, and they heard it loud and clear. And we will remain on that path no matter what. If we lose anything, because we have lost everything and anything multiple times, especially in Lebanon. We have lost a lot of family members. We have buried so many people. We have stood at the headstones, at the burials of so many people, vowing to them that we will not let their blood go in vain. How are we supposed to stop after all of the sacrifices that we made? We don't care. We're dying either way. We might as well die with dignity.
I have a question about that. So like the American left, I think, is a real problem in this. And I think there's a lot of leftists who might understand the Cuban Revolution and might think, oh, that's a people's revolution. But there's a huge number of those who would then discount the Islamic Revolution as like somehow a religious authoritarian situation. But both of them were a people's revolt against an oligarch that the U.S. had like imposed there. You know, Batista in Cuba and then the Shah in Iran. And these were like very corrupt, very violent against their own people, and the people had enough, and they wanted to improve their society, and so they got together and did that. And I find that to be so shocking how the left here has distanced itself from understanding what a people's revolution is. And I think further, like, they don't even understand what happened in Syria. Like, if you just look at what Soleimani did, you would say, oh, he was an ally of America because he was fighting ISIS. But why wasn't that true? Can you explain why he wasn't an ally of America? Because if you just look at it, to someone who doesn't understand what actually happened there, it seems confusing why we wouldn't have.
Because look, you need if you're an outsider, if you don't know what's going on, you need to put a map first before you talk about anything. You need to put a map, especially of Syria, and especially of Syria, Iraq, and Jordan, because there's that triangle between, basically at the border between those three countries, which is called a 10th. It's called the L10th area. That area is very vital, and we lost a lot of fine men to try and liberate it, but the Americans were adamant on keeping it in their hands, because it's that area where they can basically operate and send in all the equipment and the technology and the weapons. Where did ISIS get its weapons from? Did it just, was it airdropped from heaven? Who gave them the
It was accidental.
What's called that anti-aircraft American made? Is it a Tomahawk? Am I saying it right? Is
that's
it a
the
Tomahawk?
one that's launched from a helicopter, so it must be
from a ship.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But then you have the one that they used, a Tau missile. They used.
Oh, right.
Where did they get U.S.-made Tau missiles from? That area, when you study it, when you look at it, and you see where the U.S. occupation bases are situated, and then you see where ISIS started, where it came out from under the sand. This is not Aladdin. This is a mercenary. This is a mercenary. Exactly. It's a mercenary group of people that were trained in a special base in both Iraq and Jordan, and were sent in to Syria. Their flights were facilitated by all the world. They came from all over the world. And how come no one thought about those white Toyota pickups? Did they just land in here from Japan? They came all the way. I don't know if it's Japanese or Korean made, Toyota. I'm not sure, but it came from Eastern Asia. How did it come here? I would like to talk about the man who took that franchise in West Asia, and maybe ask him, who paid you? How did you deliver these trucks? In which land did you deliver these trucks? Did they come from Iraq? If they came from Iraq, where did they land from? If they came from Jordan, how did they come to Jordan? Who facilitated them? Who gave them? Who gave those keys to ISIS leaders? And then who gave them all of these weapons, and who made their passage so easy to get into these specific areas? And then my other question is, show me, please, show me one footage of Americans fighting against ISIS, bombing. We have footage of Americans going in a plane, bombing certain mountains. But one of those mountains that Americans were bombing was Athurda mountain in 2017, where they killed 110 Syrian Arab army soldiers, because those soldiers in Athurda mountain in Deir Zor were preparing for an attack against ISIS. The Americans used their air force to bomb the soldiers, which made way for ISIS to advance. So basically, we all know in our region, the US as the ISIS Air Force. If you don't know that, it's your problem. So you need to understand that what you're watching is not true. You don't believe anything about COVID. You don't believe anything about elections, but you believe anything that happens outside your border, especially when people are being killed, people like me. You believe it easily. Why? Why don't you question this? Why don't you have certain critical thinking about this? Look at the map and please answer me. Where did these multinational ISIS members come from? Who brought them here? Who airlifted them from Syria to Yemen? They're now the same people fighting in Yemen. Who airlifted them from Syria to Libya? The same people. They are fighting for $500 per month in Libya at the moment. Don't you ask these questions? I mean, it is simple. Where did they get all the C4 to bomb us? Who sells the C4 worldwide? Simple questions.
It's one of the most amazing wars when you actually understand what's going on, because they have the entire population who's supposed to be funding the war believing the complete opposite of what actually is about. Like, normally there's a little gray area in war, but this is just like, if you ask an American, what did we do in Syria? Oh, we're fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda. But it's the complete opposite. ISIS and Al Qaeda were our allies, and they were being positioned in ways so that we could have excuses to bomb Syria, and they wouldn't have to say we were bombing Syria, because the whole point is Americans didn't want a war in Syria.
And even some American officials have kind of admitted that they have been supporting and funding terrorist groups in Afghanistan and in Syria.
Sorry,
it's not something that.
Please tell me why Julian Assange is in prison. He's in prison because he exposed them. He specifically exposed Syria, specifically. and the relationship between Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Americans. That's why he's in prison. That's why he's wanted. That's why they want his head, despite the fact that his work was A-okay on journalism, but when it comes to their kind of journalism, it's not. It's some sort of unwanted information. But look, what's funny, it's tragically funny is when you look at the map again in Syria, you see where ISIS was situated and where Al-Qaeda is situated, where basically they are situated in ways that they don't interact, but they are allies because each part of them is funded by a different group of nations. One is funded because the United States of America didn't pay one dime for the war in Syria. It was the UAE, basically the Persian Arab Gulf states. It was the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and some others that don't want to say that they were part of it, but they were obviously part of it, like Kuwait and Oman, but and Bahrain. But the issue is basically the amount of money that was paid. It was paid by Qatar, by the UAE, and by Saudi Arabia. And it's not me saying it. It's the former foreign minister of Qatar saying it on live TV. You can find his interviews saying that we had a fight in Syria over the prey. This is what he says in pure, clear Arabic language. We had a fight. They put so much money to destroy Syria, so much money, they could pave the entire Arab world 3 times.
Wow.
They could feed every hungry child in the world with the money that they paid to destroy Syria. And now they're running to try and find a diplomatic solution for Syria. They're all running to take a picture with President Bashar al-Assad. You don't like the fact that the country elected its own president and that its president is being elected again and again. Well, you were okay with having a kingdom in the UK and a kingdom in Saudi Arabia and a kingdom in Jordan. Exactly. That's okay to have a regime that goes that far, but Syria is not allowed to have it. It's not up to you to say who's legitimate and not. Look at your own politics. You've been ruled by the same people for more than 200 years and you're looking at us? Come on. But what's even more funny is that when you try and tell the people, listen to me, I just want you to listen to me, then go and do your own research, they are still not willing to listen. It's just crazy.
It's more comfortable to believe the lies and feel that everything is just,
you're not supposed to do your own research.
Going by standards. Not at all. For anything.
For anything. Doing your own research is what idiots do. That's what Americans now believe. Yeah. It used to be called reading, but now it's verboten. So
it's pseudoscience or anti-science now. Like
about General Soleimani, he so obviously he was a real problem for America because he was attacking ISIS, which was a de facto ally of America, or you could just say an ally. And when he died, you said that it sort of, well, first of all, you said there were other retaliations that happened. I'd like for you to elaborate on that. And then I'd like for you to elaborate how his death has emboldened the resistance. Like, those are 2 interesting points.
When you look at
what... Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say, like, to add to Chris's question, that in Iran, we say that Martyr Soleimani is more dangerous for the imperialist powers than General Soleimani. I think, well, to me, that's very true.
The second part of my show that was aired on Tuesday, and its title is Martyr Soleimani is far more dangerous than General Soleimani. And what we mean is that the legacy of Qasem Soleimani is far, far more vital and critical to the work of the resistance than his work as a general. Look, I'll give you a very fast example. In 1992, 91, 92, I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2. But in that time, Israel assassinated the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi. And at that time, the resistance was gaining momentum and liberating many small swaths of land, but it was steadfast against the Zionists, and it was baffling for the Zionists. They couldn't believe that it was happening. They killed him at the funeral of Sheikh Raghib Harb. So they killed Sheikh Raghib a week before that. Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, the Secretary General of Hezbollah at that time, went to pay his respect at the funeral of Sheikh Raghib Harb. And after that, he was assassinated with an Apache helicopter by the Zionists in southern Lebanon. At that time, everyone was saying that this is a disaster for Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not going to surpass that. They're not going to be able to move beyond that. And in comes the most amazing leader that Lebanon has ever witnessed, and if I may, that West Asia has ever witnessed, is Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. That man took the legacy of Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi with the help of his comrades from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and was able to basically push the Lebanese resistance into areas that we have never in a million years would have thought that were possible. Fast forward 1992-2000, liberation, the first Arabic country that was liberated from the actual occupation of the Zionists. Fast forward 2006, war. Devastating war for Lebanon. Up until the last moment, Hezbollah was still capable of landing missiles inside of occupied Palestine and scaring the hell out of the Israeli illegal colonial settlers and the Israeli occupation army. Similarly, Haj Qasem Soleimani, with his work, the way he liberated the land, the way he improved the capabilities of the resistance, whether militarily or at the tactical level as well. The martyrdom of Haj Qasem Soleimani gave new blood to the resistance, to the revolution, just like the blood of the martyrdom of Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi gave new blood and new motivation to the resistance in Lebanon. Haj Qasem Soleimani's martyrdom gave a new way of if you will, that it's not more of hatred as it is steadfastness, as it is a decision. When you make a decision, you want to kill my leader, you're going to have to kill thousands, no, millions of Soleimani now. You killed one Soleimani, you're going to have to face millions of Soleimanis. This is exactly what happens with an ideology like that of Haj Qasem Soleimani. Right. Look at what happened in 2021, 2022. The Al-Quds, the sword of Al-Quds in occupied Palestine. Look at the capabilities that Hezbollah now has because of what Haj Qasem Soleimani gave them, and after that in his martyrdom, what they were able to do with winning the Marine war with the Zionist entity by winning us that field, that gas field in the Mediterranean. Look at the Al-Quds sword, the operation of Al-Quds sword. Look at Jenin. All of the young men, especially the Lions Den and the brigades of Jenin inside the West Bank, look at them. They are the students of Qasem Soleimani. If the West doesn't know that, they're going to know it the hard way. Look at Yemen. Have you seen the military carnival, the military parade that the Yemenis have been doing for the past 4 months? Mind-blowing, the amount of missiles that they have and the types of missiles that they have. Yemen did not have that before 2015. After the martyrdom of Haj Qasem Soleimani, they started manufacturing missiles in commemoration of Haj Qasem Soleimani. Look at the Iraqis. Look at what happened in Iraq and what's happening in Iraq. I believe that Iraq is at a very, very dangerous crossroads at the moment, because a lot of hands and a lot of foreign interventions want to see Iraq basically lit again with internal infighting and basically igniting some sort of a civil war. But it's the legacy of Haj Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis that stopped that, that made way for more cooperation between the resistance instead of division between the resistance. Look at Syria. The fruit of Haj Qasem Soleimani's martyrdom made way for national resistance in Syria that is actually bombing the occupied territories, the bases, the American bases, on if not a daily routine, on a weekly routine. They are bombing them with whatever missiles they are capable of doing, and that's the legacy of Haj Qasem Soleimani. Look at the new economic ties that are being forged and waged in West Asia, especially between Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, to defy the sanctions, to stop the sanctions. 2 months or maybe a month ago, the United States of America bombed a convoy of oil and gas that was transferred from Iran to Syria because it was at the beginning of the winter season in Syria, and Iran wanted to help in any way possible to bring back electricity in some areas and to help with heating, diesel fuel and gas for the people to heat up their homes. The U.S. bombed those convoys that were supposed to help the Syrian families. But there were just a couple of the convoys that actually reached Syria and helped the Syrian people. Look at the ships that the Americans and their puppet governments are trying to stop. These ships that are supposed to come to Syria and Lebanon to help rid the people from the sanctions that are being sent by Iran. And look how Iran responded by taking out other ships in its own region. So it's no longer the wait and see what happens. It's a retaliation mode. And now it's more of a proactive mode than it is of a reactive mode that's going on with the Islamic Republic and with its allies in the axis of resistance. We took it upon ourselves in Lebanon this past summer to threaten the occupation with the drones that Hezbollah sent by telling them you are not allowed to take 1 ounce of gas from Karish field before we take our own resources. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And don't believe me. Go and read what the Israeli newspapers were writing about that. Look at the agreements. I mean, the so much celebrated Abraham Accords. Listen to what the public had to say. Listen to what the public had to say in the Mondial, in the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. People were fleeing when they heard that it was Israeli media, or they attacked them verbally when they said they were Israelis, to a point where Israelis started saying, we're from Ecuador, we're from Argentina. Yeah. This is what the public wants. The public wants liberty. They want liberation. They want dignity, especially the public in the Persian Gulf Arab states, in the UAE, in Qatar, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia. The people are not the same as the regimes, and this is what scares the West, and this is what scares the puppet regimes as well. And all of this, whether directly or indirectly, is the fruit of the work and the martyrdom of Haj Qasem Soleimani and the likes of Haj Qasem Soleimani. Look, when Imam Ruhullah Khomeini, Qudsallah Surruh, passed away, the revolution in Iran only gained throttle. It gained momentum. It didn't stop because it was a school of thought and a mental model that was transferred to the youth of Iran. It's the same thing here with Qasem Soleimani. You killed the man, but you can never kill his legacy.
But it was also a very unjust killing, like extremely unjust. And that's what I think is the real, like, absolute, like, mistake, strategic mistake. If you're, from the American side, like, why would you do this? And then to add insult to injury, the retaliation against the U.S. base just made the U.S. show its cowardly hand. Like there's no, I mean, it's like if you had a bully and he was punching a kid and then all of a sudden he get punched back and then he just goes and cries and sit in the corner. Like the bully has nothing because when they're attacked, they even hide their wound and they're like, no.
And before that, just like less than a year before that, do you remember what happened to the U.S. Marines and how they were in the Strait of Hormuz?
Describe this.
All remember that.
What are you talking about?
You're not. You don't remember that when the Iranians made a landing on a U.S. battleship and took hostage who trespassed and went into Iranian waters? I mean, you're just macho in Hollywood movies, honey. All the weapons that you have means nothing when it comes to the natives who are defending their own land. Exactly. And Iranians,
and you can't imagine how proud we feel about that.
They have like small ships that were whizzing around and they were able to take them hostage. It was amazing. For me, that was like a mega Marvel movie.
I think this is also really relevant to the current situation in Iran because I think the unjust killing of Soleimani shows that like the people of the region would fight. If a war was kicked off because of the bombing of the base, they would just have an endless supply of people fighting America. It would be like unlike any other war. And currently in Iran, this whole like phony revolution that they're trying to kick off and keep the liberal minds in America brainwashed because they think it's about ladies' headwear. The whole point of this thing, Iran, like the majority of people in Iran would not be down with this at all. This is just a small group of expats who've been sort of like westernized, who have no interest in moving back to Iran, who are like basically hogging the airwaves and saying that, and then some MEK agents and maybe originally there was some genuine protest against, you know, a death in police custody. But then when it sort of came out what actually happened, then a lot of that motivation dropped off. But there isn't a huge, genuine revolution in Iran. The Iranian people are still very steadfast against imperialism. So there's no way to actually have a war or a regime change unless
and they have heard this for 43 years. We've been hearing that the regime is collapsing the next day, and it hasn't happened for so many years. It's just so ridiculous for us. Like,
what's really funny is that when I've been to Iran twice. And the second time, I had more time to actually walk the streets of Tehran and a bit of Kerman, but more in Tehran. And I was walking, I was looking all around, and I was like, people are not wearing veils. And that for me was a shock, because they either had like a veil just put with the hair out, or when we are in malls or in markets, women are not wearing any veils, and there's no one telling them anything. Me, as a Muslim Shia woman from Lebanon, I was flabbergasted by the sight that I was seeing, because even I was brainwashed by the media telling me that Iran does this and Iran does that. When I went and I saw, I was like, I mean, what are they talking about? This is exactly anti everything that I ever learned in Western media or in Lebanese media that is against Iran. Because they also have their own kind of propaganda, or the Persian Gulf Arab states media as well against Iran. When I went and saw in my own eyes, and then I saw the culture, and I listened to the music, and I saw the choirs playing and the women singing, and I was like, okay, I think that I'm living in a prison in Lebanon, but Iran is actually free. This is what I thought, because as a Lebanese hijabi woman, I was not able to find a job when I finished my college education because I'm a hijabi, because they discriminate against hijabis in Lebanon. But in Iran, it was like you can be whoever you want and do whatever you want. In Iran, I saw women on motorcycles. In Lebanon, it's beyond forbidden for a woman to go on a motorcycle. In Iran, I saw women driving buses, public transportation. You would never see that in Lebanon, despite the fact that Lebanon is one of the most liberal Arab Islamic countries of the Middle East. But you don't see that, because liberation and freedom of women in Iran is way past what we have in the Arab world, especially in Lebanon, specifically those Lebanese women who think that by being naked is being free. No, honey, I'm more free than you will ever be, and I'm wearing a hijab. I mean, it's crazy, because what I tell the people, especially Westerners, honey, don't believe me. Buy a ticket, get yourself to Iran. Go and see that beautiful country. Walk its streets. Talk to its people. Don't believe me. Go live the experience.
That's one of the biggest mistakes, is that Iran makes it so difficult for Americans to travel there. If they were smart about that policy, they would do just like Cuba does, and let, you know, there's the sanctions, there's whatever, do that. But if tourists want to come and check it out, because Iran is really an interesting place, and it's nothing like it's perceived. I mean, even the role of women, in some metrics, women have more power in Iran than they do in the U.S. I mean, they had a female vice president before the U.S. did. So it's like, I mean,
and add to that, they always talk about the Islamic values in Iran, but I'd like to tell them, especially the Arabs who are speaking against Iran, if you are an Iranian and you want to have a second wife, you're gonna have to have the acceptance of the first wife. That's
that's amazing.
How powerful the women in Iran are. In the Arab world, no.
Wow.
We wish. In Lebanon, we still fight for the custody of our kids. I have so many friends who got divorced, but they got their young babies taken away from them because the law is so pathetic. Go and look at the Iranian law, and then come talk to me about Islamic values and how Islam is denigrating the Iranian culture. No, honey, it's the other way around. Learn about it from the people. Come along, read from books that are not assigned to you by your schools or by your elite in your country. Try to find books that are not found in your country, especially translated books. Look at them, read them, and then come and tell me what you think about Iran. Look, it's very easy, but at the same time, it's very complicated, because you're asking you're asking people to just dump everything that they have ever learned since they walked. You know, it's not easy. And trust me, I've gone through this, because I was a very, very different person, especially when I came back to Lebanon and I got into my university. I was a different person. The way that I looked at the resistance of my own country, because I lived in a hellhole. I lived in a very fake place known as the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates. I was born and raised there, so I was way far from anything that has to do with the resistance. Then I came back home and I got introduced to it, and I got to talk to other people. I was afraid to approach hijabis because I thought that they will play with my mind and they will affect me, and then I will become one of them. I was afraid to approach my own brothers and sisters because of the brainwashing that I lived through. And I lived in the Middle East. So go figure what happens to people living outside the Middle East. But then I came and I started talking to the people. I started going to certain areas that were always bombed or occupied by the Zionist entity. I started looking at the families. I started looking into my own family members who were presented at the altar of our nation without me knowing that they ever died to protect this nation. Then I started to educate myself by reading a lot of books and by getting involved with groups and with courses and with testimonials. It needs a lot of work. It is not easy. And I don't want to preach on other people to do it, but I just want them to ask questions. Just ask us. We're very happy to answer you. We have nothing else to lose. Why would we lie to you? Why?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and they just simply, on the case of Iran and the recent unrest that we had, like, any voice coming from inside Iran is, I mean, it's very, very difficult to find any voice coming from inside Iran. And if there is, it's very easy to silence them, to label them, and just discredit them, because there are not many sources, like especially independent sources out there to get your news from and like talk to. It's very easy to just create a hyper reality that does not exist in any way and just sell it to people. And unfortunately, I should say, a large proportion of the Iranian diaspora is playing into it, and it's just amplifying those fake voice. Or maybe they're not a large proportion of the diaspora, but they have the loudspeakers and the money and everything. So it looks like that's the
but
case.
they're magnified by Western culture, who sees them as understandable because they are mimicking Western culture. The idea that women, like, their achievement in life is to be more sexually available to men is hilarious. Like, if you want to be controlling yourself, like, you should be. And the thing is, like, if you talk to a liberal, they'll be like, yeah, sexual objectification is terrible. But then they'll be, at the same time, they'll be like, I can't imagine why those women don't want to take off more of their clothes. Like, that's the whole argument with hijabs. It's like, I just don't get it. Like, sometimes it's too hard to even try and understand how people think, because, like, they're not consistent at all. And that's one of the things I really like about.
It's fine by me. I'm not against them. I'm just against them meddling into my culture and my values. You have you, we'll do us. You don't come attack us because of how we look and how we decide to live our lives. No, you don't get to do that at all. I mean, especially when it comes to how I raise my children or how I operate as a wife and a mother. Look, I am an accomplished woman. No one needs to know that. I accomplished for myself. I'm a PhD, I have 3 masters, I'm an assistant professor, I work in a TV. Before all of this, and above all of this, I am a mother and I am a wife. I'm so proud of my husband. I'm so proud of my daughters, and I would leave the entire world for them. Has it not been for Jihad al-Tabyin, if I were not holding this as a burden on my shoulders, to be a fighter, to bring out the truth, this is what Jihad al-Tabyin means. If I didn't have that duty on my shoulder, I would drop it like a hot potato and go live my life as a mother and wife. I don't need this. I don't want this, but I have to do it because the voices from this region who are capable to talk with that different culture are very, very few. And I am happy to be one of them, but at the same time, it's a burden on me, because trust me, I don't care whether you believe me or not. I don't care whether you understand me or not. I just want you to get the heck out of my face. Don't come here. Don't steal my resources. Don't try to tell me what to do. Leave me be. That's what I want.
Well,
but
then
I still
your
have to try and voice it to the West.
Your position of being in the region that's being attacked, you know, that it's more under it. I mean, you have a little bit understandable motivation there, because this is they're destroying your backyard. But people like the journalist circles that I hang out with, and even myself, like, if you really understand what's going on, it is a burden, because the people around you are clueless, and you're seeing, I mean, here it's not the bombs are dropping, but they're destroying America. I memean, America can't last like this. You can't have inflation like this. You can't just keep siphoning money off with the next ghost story or next boogeyman that they decide to talk about and have Congress. Oh, we have to do this problem and solve this problem or fix this country. You know, it's just endless, and they just keep repeating it over and over again. It's going to grind to a halt at some point. And so you have to fight back. But the thing that Satara and I talk about and struggle with is like finding a place where you can do that. You feel like your work and your life's effort isn't going towards supporting this kind of you know, attacks on your people or good people. But then, like, the system itself doesn't support that. So you have to really be creative to find solutions to support that kind of you know, if you want to do that as much as possible, you have to figure out the way to do that. So I was just curious to hear your thoughts on that in terms of your own experience and maybe the journalists and people you know around you. Like, how do you bridge that gap between being I mean, in Lebanon, I guess it's pretty easy. Like you were saying, your university gave you an award for being like anti-Zionist. Here they would like send you to prison probably if you're speaking. Yeah.
Which is why I'm never going to the United States of America, by the way. Never landing in that land. I mean, I saw what they did to my colleague, Mazia Hashimi, who's an American, and how they, without a charge, without anything, they just dropped her off at a federal prison, denied her her rights as a Muslim woman. No, thank you, because I will be shouting my way there and shouting my way out of there if I'm not shot and killed. So no, I'm not going there. But look, the way that we see it here is, with my colleagues and the people that work within the same line of work that I do, we are motivated by the experiences that we go through, especially after the liberation. The liberation in Lebanon in 2000 was a big motivation for us, because we lived as young children. When I used to come on the holidays with my parents to Lebanon, we never went to our villages because they were occupied. And then when I grew up and came to Lebanon and they were liberated, and then I started learning about it, and then I started going to those areas and then watching the documentaries about how those areas were occupied before, and they were without land, without trees. I'm sorry, they were without people, without trees, without plantations, and that how it became. And then I got introduced later to my husband, and I accepted his village as my new village, which is right on the border with occupied Palestine. And I chose with him to buy a land there and build our house there and teach our children and educate them about this in their own land. It became like a life-changing moment for me. I started living in that moment. This career became my life. And I didn't want to change it. It is a bit heavy, and sometimes it's a burden when you want just to live normally, when you want to take your kids on a vacation, for example. There are certain areas where I cannot go, and this is just a privilege for me to just think that there are places that I can travel to. It's fine. It's okay. As long as I'm living safely with my kids in my own village, it's more than enough for me. And it's a burden on the financial matter as well, because you don't get recruited by certain institutions or certain countries, for that matter. If I want to relocate to another country, I can't, because I am basically branded as an axis of resistance woman. I'm proud of it. I call myself the Southern girl. Wherever I go, it's the Southern girl. But it is very hard for other people to accept it. I accept it fully. globally. I am sanctions in banked. I'm sanctioned in money transfer companies. I cannot transfer money. I cannot receive money. I cannot do banking transactions outside of Lebanon. And I don't care. It's okay. It's fine. It means nothing when it comes to actually living without an occupation, actually living with dignity. When I talk to my friends who work in the same area, in the same zone or the same axis of resistance media, we suffer from the same things, but at the end of the day, we do it with dignity. We are ready to die at any moment while doing our work because we know that what we are doing is the right thing. And this is not easy. I mean, maybe it's a difference in culture when our region, especially the eastern part of the world, they always say that they are ready to die for something. We are ready to give our lives for something. We don't just say this. This is part of ideology, Chris. I mean, I'm pretty sure Sarah knows what I'm talking about. It is part of how we perceive the afterlife. If I'm going to accept the conditions that I live in right now as a human being oppressed and just wait to die to get my freedom, what kind of life is it? If I don't voice the catastrophes that the oppressed people go through, if I'm not their voice, then what am I going to do with my life? What kind of a life am I going to lead? What kind of a mother and of an icon am I going to be to my children, to my girls? Not only my girls, I have 3 daughters. How am I going to show them that as a powerful woman, you can be whoever you are, wherever you are, and still fight for the oppressed? I mean, it's a decision that we make and that we abide ourselves to, and it's a vow that we give ourselves that we will live through this life by being truthful to ourselves, by standing with the oppressed, by not allowing injustice to happen wherever it is, or else what kind of a life are we living really? What are we doing here? What is our role in this life? So it's very much attached to how we perceive the afterlife. Because if we don't, then might as well just drop everything and go live for this current life that we're living. But it's not that case. No.
Like you said, it doesn't matter how hard you try for, like, this is the Islamic perspective that we have. No matter how hard you try for this life, it's something that's going to be lacking. And it brings so much peace, and that to feel that you're consistent with your values and you're living up to your values. I mean, this is probably something that is shared by any human being that wants to live. I mean, it's not necessarily religious, but for me, it's religious because I'm a Muslim. But it's probably something that a lot of humans can relate to if they try to think outside the box and outside the framework that they've been given.
Mental state. It's how you perceive your life and why you're here and what you're doing. I mean, look, this is an easy job for me when it comes to being a journalist or presenter. But what's hard is being an instructor, an assistant professor. It's hard to be responsible for the minds of so many young children, youngsters that are in their early 20s that know nothing about life, and you're basically that figure that's spending all that time with them, trying to teach them what's right and trying not to make a mistake because it will affect them and it will affect how they perceive their own life. It is very hard, very, very hard.
But it's rewarding.
It is very rewarding when you see that small seed that you implant in those youth, and that you see it growing and you see them being creative on their own, especially in causes like the Palestinian cause, the liberation cause, the war against imperialism and colonialism. Especially we're talking about kids that are like born in 2002 and 2000. I was like, the other day I was like, my God, I'm old. I can't believe how old I am. But it's like I'm an 80s edition, and I have students who are like in their 20s who are born after the liberation in Lebanon. And my mind just goes like blank. I mean, you are not born in you were not born after the, oh my, you were like 2 years old in the 2006 war. Oh my God. So we're talking about those kids that they have not experienced any of that, but still decide to be resistance fighters, still decide to be steadfast against imperialism, against colonialism, despite the fact that they can easily be dragged into the liberal culture. It's very easy, social media. But the fact that they decide to drop that and follow that path, for me, that's magical. That's amazing.
That is really nice to hear. It's sadly not enough that happens here in the US. It's really rare to find people, especially young people, and who understand the problems that we're facing. And I think changing the opinions of Americans is very important, because that's where a lot of these battles are funded and originate from the ignorance of America. So,
and a lot of the problems of the world are coming from.
Yeah, and it's rooted in the ignorance here. So it's great to have you on to talk about it. I was glad that you mentioned the lion's den, because that is a very interesting phenomenon. So maybe sometime we could have you on to talk about that.
I'm pushing my students to write research papers about them. We're doing content analysis research papers, and I have many students who actually wrote about how the Western media perceives operations done by the Lion's Den versus how Arab pro-resistance media does. And it's amazing the findings that they found, because when you push them to watch certain videos and read certain issues that they don't normally go to by themselves, it's amazing what they can come up with. And for me, it's such a blessing to be in the time of youngsters like the Lion's Den, because they are rewriting the Palestinian history like no one ever did, and it's amazing.
They're liberating Palestine, actually liberating it, from the PA as well, because we know the PA is very corrupt. Definitely. So it's wonderful to see places like Nablus, starting to be completely liberated.
Definitely.
Yeah. So hopefully we could talk to you about that next time. But is there anything else you wanted to ask, Satara?
No, nothing that I wanted to ask, but I just wanted to say that I think the U.S. knew very well who the General Soleimani was, but what they actually failed to understand was how popular he was with the Iranians and the people of the region, and how his legacy is going to continue no matter if he's physically not here anymore with us.
They don't understand us. We still
look at the images of
was martyred in the 7th century. We still mourn and walk the path of Imam Hussein. They don't understand what martyrdom means to us, and they come and kill General Soleimani. We're just going to take everything he taught us and walk through. That's it.
They should look at the footages of the funeral that was held in Iran for him, which has been reportedly recorded as the most massive and the greatest funeral ever held in contemporary history. There's nothing like that. It's just you can't find anything close to that anywhere in the world. He was very, very popular.
Around Iran also held their own funeral processions as well, and hundreds of thousands of people took part of that, and which was just majestic and amazing. Yeah. And I'm just honored to be able to even talk about the school of thought of Haj Qasem, and I want to thank you guys for giving me that opportunity.
You'll have to go check out the stream that you did yesterday about that, and encourage everyone else.
You can find it on Press TV's website, and also I uploaded it this morning on my YouTube channel as well.
We'll make sure to give a link to that.
You can find it on my YouTube, and the title is Soleimani's Transnational Symbolism, and it's episode 191.
Great. All right. Well, we'll encourage everyone to look at that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marwa, I know that you have been very busy, and it was great to talk to you about General Soleimani. And thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Untitled Tales podcast. We will make sure to include some sources that we mentioned, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you get notified of the new posts.